Amrit?
Yes, sir. We'll admit people.
Admit all and let's start.
Yes. A very good morning to one and all present here. Distinguished guests, respected professors, and my fellow students. It is with utmost pleasure that I, Amrit Koshi, and my co-host Anmol Agarwal, on behalf of the IIM Nagpur fraternity, would like to welcome you all to the inaugural edition of the Deep Branding Summit, organized by the Center of Excellence in Brand Management, IIM Nagpur.
Ever since its foundation in 2015, the Indian Institute of Management Nagpur has strived to create value-driven leaders, global managers, and entrepreneurs with strong conceptual foundations and an analytical approach that helps students excel in their chosen fields. Through its high-quality education, research, and industry engagement, the aim of the institution is to innovatively address the needs of a modern India, thereby connecting aspirations and realities in order to attain benchmarks that are respected internationally.
The Center for Excellence in Brand Management has been formed this year under the aegis of IIM Nagpur, with a vision to become the leading center for impactful knowledge creation, dissemination, and practice in brand management. The CEBM serves as a platform to bring together academia and industry, as well as to conduct inclusive and collaborative research in order to achieve the aim of enhancing knowledge and managerial know-how in brand management and allied areas. To begin today, I would like to invite Professor Rahul Seth to address the gathering.
Thank you, Amrit. On behalf of CEBM, I am Nagpur. Magesh, Ranjita, and I welcome you to the Deep Branding Inaugural Summit 2021. Most people would sooner die than think. This statement by Bertrand Russell is an exhortation to think and has never been more relevant. The vicissitudes that Industry 4.0, or as the Japanese call it, Society 5.0, presents, makes it imperative for us to think deeply in making sense of the highly uncertain future that awaits us, a future replete with unknown unknowns. At the very core, we sincerely hope that the Deep Branding Inaugural Summit emerges as a beckoning for our minds to a path of discovery through intellectual freedom, not necessarily in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Herein, I paraphrase from Marcel Proust's magnum opus, In Search of Lost Time. At the Center of Excellence in Brand Management at IIM Nagpur, we have attempted to bring together great minds in presenting a cornucopia of ideas that I am sure will nourish us in our individual journeys into the sea of unknown unknowns. We expect the deliberations, discussions, and debates, thus designed and planned, to enliven us with intriguing possibilities. Amrit?
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Professor Dr. Bhimaraya Maitri, Director, IIM Nagpur, to deliver the welcome address to the gathering.
Very good morning, respected today's guests, Sabna Chada, Senior Director of Marketing, Google Southeast Asia and India, Professor Russell Bell, Professor of Marketing, Crafts Food Canada Chair in Marketing, Sulich School of Business, York University, and my colleague Professor Rahul said, Chairman, Center of Excellence in Brand Management, I am Nagpur, and my faculty colleagues and the active members of the Center of Excellence of Brand Management, Professor Magesh, Professor Ranjita, and all the advisors of Center of Excellence in Brand Management, and active student members associated with Center of Excellence in Brand Management, the marketing club, student, and my dear students, faculty members, ladies and gentlemen. I take this opportunity first of all to thank the Center of Excellence in Brand Management entire team under the chairmanship of Professor Rahul Seth for organizing this very apt and very relevant summit, Deep Branding Inaugural Summit 2021. And I must say that today we have two luminaries, Sabna Chada, who is accomplished corporate leader, and her growth journey and the kind of contribution she has done in the corporate world, occupying the country marketing director in India and soon taking the responsibility of Southeast Asia, and also organizing the very, very relevant and art, and today we all talk about ESG. So keeping justice, equality in mind and gender in mind, she organized Internet Sati program, and in that trained more than 30 million women on digital literacy. So these are all about, very clearly talks about, today we are lucky to have such a great personality leader as a part of this summit, Deep Branding Inaugural Summit of 2021. Professor Russell, well, all of you know that he doesn't need introduction. He is a well-known authority and he is considered to be one of the legends in marketing. Of course, Sulich Business School is not new to India. It is known, of course, globally, and India it is very close because their operations started long back in Hyderabad in India. So Professor Russell and his contribution in the area of marketing and brand, definitely his presence is going to make a big difference, and each one of us are going to learn a lot from this interaction from these two great leaders under the banner of Deep Branding Inaugural Summit 2021. And this particular summit has large number of the experts. You know that our advisor Subramanyeshwarji is a part of it. Pratyusha Agarwal is there, Dr. Erich is there. So these are the personalities are going to be part of it. And I am sure this Center of Excellence in Brand Management, this very inaugural summit is going to make a mark and set a benchmark here at IIM Nagpur and also many institutions like this. Just to briefly introduce about IIM Nagpur. IIM Nagpur started 2015 as a 14th IIM in a 13th biggest city of India, that is Nagpur, which is also known as a heart of the heartland, that is center point of India. IIM Nagpur, a brand new campus, is housed in the heart of 80 and art companies in a special economic zone, which is first of its kind in India, and that is positions IIM Nagpur as a unique among all the 20 IIMs. IIM Nagpur very soon, since its inception, emerged as a vibrant and fastest growing, and people normally call it as a rising star. So this is the way IIM Nagpur is moving step by step and in a geometric path. IIM Nagpur has currently 31 very strong faculty member doing cutting edge research and reasonably good exposure of corporate world and global exposure. And IIM Nagpur currently running 3 programs. One is a flagship program, postgraduate program, that is a MBA, which is our flagship program. We have 240 capacity, and we also have PhD program. And just this 28th of this month, we are going to start a first batch of working professionals master's program leading to MBA degree. And IIM Nagpur is also going to start another working professionals MBA program from its satellite campus, Pune. IIM Nagpur also has to plan to start its another satellite campus in Hyderabad, another iconic city of India, in the next academic year. IIM Nagpur currently conducts large number of e-learning programs started in December. Currently already we are doing 8 programs. Most of the functional areas started the online program. They are all postgraduate certificate program of about 1 year duration. IIM Nagpur is also working 2 programs which are unique in the country and also which are need of an hour for the corporate world. One is a cyber security and data science program in collaboration with FedEx Institute of Technology, Memphis University, USA, and that program is going to come very soon in the beginning of the next academic year. And another program IIM Nagpur is going to start, that is blockchain. Blockchain program is in collaboration with Department of Digitalization, Center of Data Science, Copenhagen Business School. Again, this is a joint certificate program of 1 year. This is also going to start again beginning of the next academic year. So these are the 2 programs. They are first of its kind in India, and these 2 programs are very much essential to the corporate world. Today, we talk about data security, network security, cyber security. So all that is going to come, and this program is coming from Center for Cyber Security and Data Analytics. IIM Nagpur also has, apart from Center of Excellence in Brand Management, IIM Nagpur has another 6 centers. One is Center for Leadership Development, another one is Center for Cyber Security and Data Analytics. We also have Council for Logistics, Infrastructure and Project Management. This is the Section 8 company which is going to undertake a certificate program for project managers and many humanitarian supply chain and to handling the emergency issues like flood and crowding during the certain puja time, the temple management and all. This particular Section 8 company is going to take. And we also have Center for Corporate Governance, CSR, Sustainability. IIM Nagpur is also as a unique center, that is Indo-Japan Research Center. So this is 2 countries working together in many areas, and large number of Japanese companies are in India. With the support of both the embassies, Indian and Japanese embassy, we have come out with this center, and this center focuses not only cultural exchange, but we are also connecting the corporates of both the countries very strongly. Apart from this, IIM Nagpur is also into a large number of short-term management development programs under the division of executive education. We do large number of programs with the corporate world, public sector, private sector, and even some of the government areas. So with this, I wish Center of Excellence in Brand Management a grand success for the debranding Inaugural Summit 2021. I am sure the deliberations and discussions are going to make a mark and insight, and this is going to set a new direction. And I am sure these experts coming in and their interaction is going to make a mark. and each one of us are going to get a new insights to build new India and also to take India to the higher level as NEP is coming in, and this particular center is going to do a lot of activities in line with new education policy 2020. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maitri, for informative words. Now, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our first speaker and panelist for today, Sabna Chada. She is the Senior Director of Marketing for both Southeast Asia and India at Google and is currently based in Singapore. She joined Google in 2014 as Head of SMB Marketing in India. Later, she became the Country Marketing Director of India and then moved to Singapore in 2017 when she took on responsibility for Southeast Asia as well. Starting a career in the US, she moved to Asia more than a decade ago to pursue her passion in and for the region and has not looked back since then. She cares deeply about making the internet equitable from a gender diversity lens and has been a pioneer of the Internet Saathi program, which has trained over 30 million women on digital literacy. Her team works across all of Google's consumer and business products, driving growth and brand love for Google. And she has worked closely with product teams to make their products work better for the next billion users. She has a range of experiences in technology, consulting, and financial services prior to joining Google. She started her career in consulting at Deloitte Consulting New York and worked across product development, operations, customer marketing at American Express for the US and international markets for more than a decade. A mother of 9-year-old twins, life is never boring and she gets energy from her teams across the region. Ma'am, we heartily welcome you to the session today.
Our second guest.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Our second guest is from the world of marketing, where he definitely deserves an eloquent introduction, but surely does not need one. It is indeed my honor to introduce and welcome Professor Russell Belk to IIM Nagpur today. Professor Belk is a distinguished research professor and the Kraft Foods Canada Chair in Marketing at Schulich School of Business, York University. He is a leading authority on consumption, consumer culture, consumer behavior, materialism, collecting, gift-giving, sharing, and the digital self. In addition to his many international accolades and honorary professorships on several continents, he has published over 600 articles, books, and videos on a variety of topics. He has also helped found the field of consumer culture theory, consumer behavior odyssey, and the Association for the Consumer Research Film Festival. It is indeed a pleasure to have you here with us, sir.
We would like to begin today with a small token of appreciation and gratitude to our guests, Sabna Chada and Professor Russell Belk. At IIM Nagpur, we strongly believe in creating a sustainable environment, and thus it is our tradition to present our guests with a unique living and breathing gift that reflects our ethos. Respected ma'am and sir, a tree has been planted on each of your behalves on the periphery of the Sundarbans forest in West Bengal as a part of the Trees for Tigers program, and the certificate for the same will be mailed to you shortly. IIM Nagpur is indeed privileged and glad to have you both midst today. Now, to make this present moment a permanent one, let's share our emotions with the reactions feature over Zoom while we click a picture. Thank you so much. And now, without further ado, I would like to invite Sabna Chada and Professor Russell Belk to take the session forward and share with us their valuable insights.
Great. I think I'm first. And it's great to be here with everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. A huge amount of gratitude. Thank you so much for this gift that you've given. What a memorable one in this time of sustainability. It's something that stands out. And so thank you so much for this gift. And also, I would like to acknowledge the amazing work that the Indian Institute of Management at Nagpur has done. It is wonderful to see as you speak about the work and the evolution and where India is going, the leadership and the students and the education that you're providing as we go into the future. And so a huge amount of respect and congratulations to all of you. I would like to thank Director Maitri and for his opening remarks and for also his leadership. And I want to thank the entire set of professors I've gotten to know during this time, Professor Seth, Professor Ranjana, Professor Magesh, and the team that my team has been working with. A huge thank you also for inviting us to be here and to speak on our behalf. It's been some time since I've been in school myself and college, and so and studying. And so I hope to share from my side the perspectives that I've gained over the last few decades. And I want to also acknowledge Professor Belk. He and I had the opportunity to connect and to exchange ideas. I've had the opportunity to read his work, and you'll see in the presentation that I have today, which I'll be doing for the first part, that I'm responding to some of the points that I've read and heard from Dr. Belk, which have inspired me to think about the role that I play as a marketer in this world of changing and evolving brands and distributed and decentralized brands, and how I need to think about my role quite differently. And so I'll share some of the points, and I'm sure I look forward to the debate that he and I will have as we go forward. And so we can bring up the presentation if that's okay. Okay, so I'll just a quick intro. I know that also you mentioned a number of areas around cybersecurity and the work that you're doing in involving a number of areas. And I before being at Google, I worked in financial services for over a decade, and so have had some exposure to some of the ideas that Professor Belk will share. So before technology, I was in financial services. So just want to mention that. But I will say, when I think about where we are and the role that I get to play in India, it's a huge opportunity for me to think about my role in a local market. Like my role at Google is where I participate as a lead from a local perspective. I very much believe that I have, I'm in a position of ability to impact the world. And from that standpoint, I will tell you a bit about a story of how Google has evolved and the role that marketing plays and the impact that we have, and what I will say is a bit of a hybrid approach to branding. When you think about deep branding, there's a role that centralization plays, there's a role that decentralization plays. And my belief is that a hybrid approach is the best. And so that's the ultimate outcome in which I will get to. But let me first start, if we can go to the next page, because I always get one particular question always asked of me, which is, why is there marketing at Google? And why do you need to market? Why is there, you must have a really easy job, Sapna, is most of the time is what I hear or what I get, because for Google products, many of them are free. They've become super well known on their own. They have grown to be immense products. And I'm sure you don't have an issue with branding, is what I mostly hear many times. I would like to tell you that the job is easy. I wouldn't say it is. It's actually, I lose a lot of sleep working for Google today. And I'll share a bit about why as we go forward. And for the longest time, people, even our CEO though, did not think that marketing at Google was needed or that it was relevant. Google is a product company. It is completely product-led. It is a technology company. And marketing has been perceived to be nice to have in its earlier years. And this is a picture of when we first went public in a very small event. And even after we went public, it was only 5 years after this, at this moment, that a single person who was a temp was hired to run marketing. And this was because our CEO, Larry in particular, said, if we need marketing, then we will not have done our job. Like, if we need marketing, then our products are not good enough, is what he's famous for saying. And interestingly, that temp that was hired after 5 years, she's today our chief marketing officer. Her name is Lorraine Toohill, and she now runs a full-fledged org of thousands of marketers, thousands, and this is in less than 20 years, and we have presence at global, regional, and local levels. And interestingly, she reports to who? Some people ask me that. There's an assumption that she reports into the business, but she actually reports to Sundar, and I think many of you know Sundar Pichai, our CEO. She reports directly to him because of the role that marketing today plays. And I tell you this story to tell you that there's an evolution that happens on products and technologies and companies like Google. One of the most admirable traits of Google's structure for a long time has been its decentralization. Product groups, from online search to mobile, Android, they're given the freedom to work independently. And Google's legendary 20% time perk that employees were given, where you get 20% of your time where you can work on anything, have resulted in great products like Gmail and Google Maps. They were side projects. Somebody was thinking about it on the side. And so, it's amazing sometimes the role that decentralization can play, and where product is given full focus and attention. But yet, the only reason that Google has not been led into what I would say is utter chaos today is because of our defined strategy and the role that branding and deep branding and thinking about more of a approach where local markets and leadership teams who are empowered to take different kinds of decisions are put to the test. And so product alone cannot drive this. Our leadership, I believe fundamentally, and if you spend any time with Sundar Pichai like I get to, great products drive quite a bit of a love, but the ultimate test is that you need to run a business. And so it's not enough, as our CEO said, and he calls it the toothbrush test. He said, if our products get used twice a day, that's success. And when we still talk about it all the time, that is the goal, that our products are used twice a day. We want to have products that work on their own, but why the shift to marketing and branding? If we go to the next page, the belief in a marketing department became very much needed and necessary because we realized a few things. To understand products at a deep level and to be able to build for the world, because you can't just build in isolation. Our mantra is you need to know the user, know the magic, and connect the two. And knowing the user means understanding real people, being it family members, friends, customers, partners, neighbors. You need to know them deeply. You also need to know the magic of the products. And then ultimately, as marketers, our goal is to connect the two, which means bringing the products and that deep understanding that we have, building the products with that deep understanding. Where the role that I as marketing play is to say, what's needed in India for our users? How do we build better products for India? And not think about technology as just building for one and not building for across the world. We have to be useful everywhere. We have to work for everyone. That's our philosophy. So our strategy and our mission has changed to being universally accessible and useful to everyone. To do that, you need to have teams that are able to bridge these various things together and to actually build products that work for everyone. And so I look at this and I say great marketing is both an art and a science. And it works when you bring both together, but you have to be extremely down on the ground to understand how you build for everyone. I want to play the first spot the first advertisement that Google made. And it's on the next page. If we can play this film.
Ma'am, you're on mute.
Sorry. So what I was saying, this was one of the first spots we ever built. It was designed on a desktop. We didn't have an ad agency that built this for us. It was done by the team at Google. And it really did what I said, which was know the user, know the magic, and connect the two. And every time people have seen this, they tell us it gives them goosebumps. I don't know if you got some goosebumps, but it builds love in a different way. And I think ultimately the power of deeply knowing our users and leveraging user insights like this, it does build branding for Google. And today I want to play a spot that recently just came out in India that shows that, you know, it's not any less relevant to us today. Our job continues to pull those insights to the forefront. And I'm going to play a spot for you right now that we just released. Are we able to play the spot on the next page? Or maybe sound isn't working. Okay, that's okay. I will just speak about this quickly and share that, and you can watch this later. But we now have insights, and we spoke about gender empowerment, for example. And the internet in India is not very equal when it comes to gender equity. And one of the big roles that, in terms of branding, that we're playing is to actually say that Google, as a brand, can help empower women and girls across the board. So branding, I would argue, is very important. But I think beyond advertising and films, if we go to the next page, is that marketing is still alive and still relevant today, even with the shift to data and algorithms. You know, I showed you maybe some of the art of the work that we're doing, but there's a lot of science in what we do. And instead of seeing the science and algorithms as machines replacing human marketers, I think the fact that today the data, in fact, complements marketing is one of the reasons I love doing what I do today. I believe that automation is enabling me to spend less time on things I don't like doing, like media optimization, and spending more time actually understanding users and building products for our users today more than ever. And so I believe that they play very much a complementary role, very much so. And if we go to the next page, we can see that we actually need data and algorithms to build new dimensions of marketing. And to a certain extent, what I see is that having data enables the decentralization of brands as they decide and users decide whether or not a brand is relevant to them. And also as brands decide whether or not they are relevant to users. Brands no longer have the control over who they want as their audience, perhaps in the way that we did decades ago. We don't have the same level of control as to where, sorry, if you can go back one page, where they appear as compared to the past. Can you go back one page? Thank you. So brands no longer have, no, sorry, one more forward. On the page with the phone. This one, yeah, thank you. And so the role of marketing that's here is knowing the users and their needs, but the important that the data is enabling us to succeed. With digital marketing, decentralization of brands gives marketers quite a bit of control on their businesses. I have been a regional marketer. I've worked in headquarters. I've worked in local markets. And what I see is that today, what I'm able to do in my role is that I have more control over what users are seeing. I'm given that control as a head of marketing in India. And this works extremely well. I feel empowered, but an increasingly turbulent business environment where things get tough, where companies need to act fast, and sometimes we move to a place of crises, a purely decentralized model won't suffice. And what is needed is an exact combination of knowledge and power amongst rank and file, but the right level of corporate leadership as well to think about where and how decision-making should take place. You know, I think there are times when strategic intervention from the top is very important in managing crisis. And I want to talk about a product in particular, or one example of a platform that you must all use and know, which is YouTube. We can go to the next page now. You all use YouTube every day, and you could argue that YouTube is a very centralized product and centralized technology. Some would say that that YouTube holds enormous plot power over its creators. Some would say that it's a platform that is very centralized. And if you think about the founding story, though, it started in a very different place. According to how it was founded, it was founded at a dinner party by Steve Chen and Mr. Hurley over a dinner party where they said it was too hard to share video. And where they wanted to democratize a world where a platform could be built where people could upload videos at just a moment's notice. And I would argue that while the platform is very much centralized in how it's built and structured, it enables creators and content creators everywhere in the world to actually do what they want, say what they want. And what that has done is it brings some amount of risk to the world in which we operate. And decentralization in this case of allowing creators and content creators to do and say what they want is scary because of this decentralization. And you could argue that a brand like YouTube would lose total control over the situation. I would argue, though, that decentralization is not necessarily a bad thing in this case. If you can have a hybrid approach where both the brand and the consumers have some control on both ends. And so YouTube has a distributed brand ownership because any creator can create independently and upload their own content. However, YouTube and Google, we still do have control of certain areas, content policies, product development for user feedback, monetization incentives. And I think what that does is it allows for a balance. You can't operate completely on its own. If YouTube did not build policies and YouTube did not have some kind of central ownership around the work, we would see what we've seen at times is that there's a lot of brand risk. There's been moments where advertisers have questioned if YouTube is a safe place. And we've worked extremely hard with a very centralized approach to make sure that we can mitigate the situation where we don't have hate speech and where we develop brand safety and architecture to be able to ensure that there is safety online. But the other thing that I would say, which is interesting, is that when you have a platform like YouTube, which is, like I'm saying, it's both decentralized and centralized, it's an opportunity for brands to work with creators and users together and create completely new economic models. What you're seeing here on this page is an opportunity for brands to work with creators. Brands are working with creators in new ways, and therefore ownership of the platform to some extent moves back and forth between content creators and brands. And in this example, a hybrid approach to distributed brand ownership gives rise to a rich and vibrant creator economy. So more brands are recognizing the power of content creators, leading to strong partnerships and marketing. And this whole realm of influencer marketing has gone to a totally different place. And today, what I would say is I see it as empowering, but I mentioned I sometimes do lose some sleep at night because things have an opportunity to go very wrong when you empower creators and brands to do what they like. And so taking both a centralized and decentralized approach is very important. So if we go to the next page, as users gain more control with increased access to the internet, and things, there's a lot that can go wrong when you don't have the right governance or the right policies to be able to ensure that you can help make a healthy ecosystem thrive. This is an example of how we recently worked with creators across India to have them commit to creating a content that is diverse and inclusive. And the aim is to ensure that the platform stays safe and responsible. This isn't where YouTube started. YouTube didn't have to think about this when we started, but over time, this now becomes very important, and the role of marketing is very important, and the role of branding, and the role of policy, and the role of content governance. All of these things are things that I would have never thought of when YouTube started, but we now need to do this. I'll also say that regulation today is something that marketers, as you think about branding, have to think about every day. Most recently in India, there's new intermediary guidelines that were launched. You have GDPR in Europe. You have a number of regulations that are focused on ensuring that we can protect users and that we can very much make the internet a safe place if players work accordingly to push forward. And so in this case, I spend a lot of my time working through regulation and then working with product teams to make sure that we can build and evolve our products for this world that evolves very quickly. And so I'm going to end with one more page, which kind of sum up some of the things on my mind. I hope you've gotten a taste very briefly of how what I see as an opportunity when it comes to branding. I very much see, as Google has evolved, that my opportunity as a marketer is to use data and algorithms, and rather than replace the art of marketing and the beauty of the work that we get to do, I believe data, algorithms, and insights actually are not replacing marketers by any means, but actually play a very complementary role. And I get to work every day with product teams, and we build products based on the data and the insights. I believe decentralization can be of marketing opportunities for brands. As marketers, we release some control. As technology releases some control, a hybrid approach is very important to the centralization of brands, and one that's beneficial to on both sides. But that comes with evolution, and that hybrid approach takes some time. Finally, the last thing I'll leave you with is brands can still retain control to some extent, but we need to get comfortable with regulation. The role of myself as a marketer in terms of branding is very much I day-to-day have to work in a world where regulation is important, because without that, I think technology would be, and I'm sure Professor Belk is going to talk about some of this, it leads to crisis, and therefore, to some extent, we have to get comfortable with the road ahead. And I will end there. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and a big thank you to Professor Belk for giving me some food for thought in my day-to-day.
Professor, we're not able to hear you. You're not audible. Still not audible, sir.
Professor
So-
Bell, you were not audible.
Amrut, you tell the Professor Russell that it is not audible.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Just pinging. Professor Belk, are you able to hear us?
Amrut, send a message to Professor Bell's chat and please tell him that.
Professor Belk will be rejoining in a minute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Now we can hear you
Good.
loud and clear.
I had to log out and log back in. I'm terribly sorry. So these were brilliant comments, and I'd like to thank Director Matri. I'd like to thank the esteemed faculty for having me back. I've given a talk here maybe a month ago or so. It's wonderful to be back. And let me try again to share my screen. I think that's one of the things that disturbed my being able to present previously. So hopefully you can see this slide. As Ms. Chadna sort of foregrounded, I'm going to be talking about distributed and decentralized brands, a little bit of difference between the two, but for practical purposes, we'll treat them as being the same. Now, somewhere in this maze of computers, Bitcoin transactions are taking place almost instantaneously, averaging 3 to 7 per second. Much more than that right now because it's an active period in Bitcoin. It just hit a high of 81,000 US dollars. I think it's down to 75 this morning, something like that. It's morning here. And contrary to popular beliefs, they do leave these transactions an electronic trail. There's a ledger where everything is recorded. But what's important from the point of view of what I'd like to talk about is that Bitcoin is the premium example of a distributed and decentralized brand. So if we begin by looking at some of the characteristics or some of the examples of distributed brands, Bitcoin is, as I said, a premier example, but there's other cryptocurrencies as well that operate on a relatively similar model. The English language, or any other language for that matter, is a distributed, decentralized brand. There's no one in control of the English language. The Oxford English Dictionary adds, a few hundred words each year, but that's not the arbiter. It's not the authority of what is good English or what is English itself. Terrorist cells so they don't get caught. Most memes. Wikipedia is a good example. Veganism. Conspiracy theories like QAnon. QAnon does have a person or persons behind it, but it's relatively decentralized. Ms. Chada mentioned DeFi, decentralized finance, operating on the Ethereum blockchain. And despite pretenses, there is a CEO there, in this case, Vitalan Buterin. We could look at Hindu religion as being a distributed brand. There's no single sacred text, no single hierarchical god. Ram and the Ramayana may be the closest, but there are many gods, regional differences. And so it's a religion to the extent that it is properly considered a religion that's very distributed. And we might say that all brands today are at least to some degree distributed brands. Consumers have taken a lot of control. There are consumer ratings, there's TripAdvisor. If you want to know what is the best plumber in your neighborhood, you can go online and find out. Chances are you'll be Googling it initially. These are all areas where consumers have begun to take at least some of the control of the brand. Influencers are another example, but of course, marketers influence influencers. To look a little bit more closely at what all of these things have in mind, there's no central authority or organization or corporate entity or government financial institution behind them. They operate without these things on a more decentralized basis. For some, like Bitcoin, even the founder is unknown. Someone posted a white paper under the name of Satoshi Nakamoto with all of the code for the initial start of blockchain in Bitcoin, and then disappeared. And we don't know who this person is. For all of these examples, there's no C-suite. There are no central authorities, once again, no executives. There's no advertising, no PR, no services, no customer relations, and therefore no organized way to respond to crises. Now, for Bitcoin, their crises include a number of things. Silk Road was an infamous example where you could use Bitcoins to purchase on this website drugs, firearms, even murders. And that was notoriously paid in Bitcoin. It's since been shut down, but it's an example of a crisis that Bitcoin had to face with no one in charge to say what to do. Mt. Gox was a Bitcoin exchange that was hacked and went bankrupt, and many people lost their money. And it led to some reforms, and Bitcoin again bounced back. Ransomware typically is paid in Bitcoins, believing they can be anonymous and getting away with it. Elon Musk has been another crisis for Bitcoin. He announced that you could buy a Tesla with Bitcoin, and then prices shot up. Shortly after that, he changed his mind and said this is taking too much energy, and prices shot back down. So these sudden rises and falls, and I mentioned it's at a new record now, are all a part of Bitcoin's crises for good or bad as well. And in each case, they bounce back. And we could look at decentralized finance in particular. The advantages are that you hold your money rather than some institution. You control where your money goes and how it's spent. Transfers of funds happen in minutes. And so if you're trying to repatriate money to India or to Africa or elsewhere in the world, you don't have to wait days. You don't have to pay fees. The transaction activity is done under a pseudonym. DeFi is open to anyone. The markets are always open 24/7. And it's built on transparency. Anyone can look at the product's data and inspect how the system works. And this is completely opposite to traditional finance. So there's some advantages to being a distributed brand. There's no centralized authority to get in the way. There's, at the same time, no organized way to respond to crises. There's no marketing budget. There's a high failure rate. These opportunities are slow to adapt and change because there is no one in charge. There's no one to hold legally accountable. And because this is a disruptive technology and has made a big impact, Bitcoin that is, it's certain that it's going to face opposition by current players, banks and governments trying to start their own alternatives to Bitcoin. So I think I had skipped one slide. Yeah, the advantages here. I thought I was talking about advantages and I was talking about disadvantages. Bitcoin and others facilitate the matching of buyers and sellers. They increase efficiency of transactions. We just saw this with DeFi. It enables more efficient contracts called smart contracts. It enables DAOs. Now, DAOs are distributed autonomous organizations, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later. It offers resilience because of this distributed nature and a lower cost of doing business. So I meant to highlight those advantages before the disadvantages. And at the same time, looking to the future, cryptocurrencies are not going away. Digital payments in India, along with demonetization, made a big impact. And now that impact is not as much as it once was, but it still made big inroads. El Salvador has recently made Bitcoin the national currency. China is introducing a digital currency, and all of this involves disintermediation. And now to sort of explain what a DAO is. There's a guy named Mike Hearn who used to be a Google engineer and then a Bitcoin entrepreneur, and now is onto some other entrepreneurial ventures. But he was giving a talk and he said, suppose we have in the future completely self-driving cars. And suppose that these are not only self-driving cars, but they're self-owning cars. We use a crowdfunding scheme to fund them, for example, and then they are licensed to themselves. The car owns itself, if you will. And if you think about it, a corporation or a government is a legal person, and there's no reason that an autonomous car could not be a legal person as well. But he went on and he said, now, suppose this car operates giving rides, a ride sharing service, and it does that using Bitcoin for the transactions. And so it's a little bit like other car sharing services, but it can operate 24/7. It doesn't have any employee costs. And for that reason, it's able to operate at much lower prices and drive the competition with human drivers in the cars out of business. And it sets aside some money, this car, for repairs, for software updates, and so forth. And at the same time, it decides that it would like to have children. And that sounds kind of strange, but it has children by buying another car and setting it up as an autonomous operator, much like itself. And it begins giving car rides and setting aside some money and having children of its own. So soon there are these self-driving, self-owning cars, autonomous cars, all around the city. They outgrow the city, move on to the other cities and villages. And they outgrow the ride sharing services. They go on into buying computer farms, into buying trains, planes, automobiles, other things, and then soon take over the whole economy. Now, that's a little bit pie in the sky, obviously, but the idea is that these distributed autonomous organizations can rule themselves. There actually has been a DAO started here where I am in Toronto, and it ran for about 6 months before it shut down. It was hacked. It was also being investigated by the US Securities and Exchange Commission. But it's such a good idea, it's bound to come back. And the idea of smart contracts is already being used in many blockchain operations. But what we're seeing and what we're going to see more of in the future is basically the digitization of everything. And I'd like to just give an example with NFTs or Nifties, as they're called. But let me begin with the notion of collecting. And collecting materially is collecting objects like these. And we've defined collecting as the selective, active, and longitudinal acquisition, possession, and disposition of an interrelated set of differentiated objects, material things, ideas, beings, or experiences that contribute to and derive extraordinary meanings from the entity, that is the collection, that this set is perceived to constitute. So it's a bunch of similar things. In the collection, we don't want any two alike. We want differentiated things, and we pretty much take them out of collection. So we don't use these stamps for postage any longer, to the extent we still have postage stamps, or we don't use these radios to listen to the radio. All of these things are sort of taken out of their common use. And this happens in virtually all cultures, virtually all eras, ages, and genders. It's been estimated that 1 out of every 3 people in the world collects something. And if you think about your email collection, your collection in WhatsApp and TikTok and so forth, all of these things are potentially collectibles. Your music collection, your film collection, perhaps. But these are material collections where consumers have prized items. They're interwoven with their sense of self. They can become an important hobby or an avocation. It's sometimes called serious leisure, and it presents opportunities for excitement and discovery. So if we now take that to the current realm, these are some tangible material collectibles and some of the prices they've been sold for. So Honus Wagner was one of the first baseball players and the first baseball that took place in the United States. And his card, collector card, sold at the time, is now worth $3.12 million US. At the time, it sold for a fraction of a penny, a fraction of 1 cent. Here's a Murakami painting. This is Takashi Murakami, which sold for $2.4 million, but it's a particular painting. Here's a Beanie Baby, one among many, but this one happens to be worth $10,000. Now, what these things all have in common is that they're rare, one of a kind, or limited edition. Now, these things, similar things, have been digitized. And we have baseball, the National Baseball Association of the US, Formula One. Crypto Kitties is something that got popular for a while, part of a series of Crypto Kitties. And these are all NFTs or non-fungible tokens. You can own these things, but what you're owning is the digital rights to this unique thing. No one else can own it. You can trade it, you can sell it to someone else. Here's another example. This one by Beeples is a pseudonym, recently sold for $69 million, actually to an Indian man, Vignesh Siddharasan. And he paid this price partly to show that Indians could pay these enormous prices as well. He said he would have paid more. But Beeple, or Mike Winkleman was actually his name, did 1 digital artwork a day for 5,000 days. And this entity is called the First 5,000 Days. And if you look at it closely, it's each of the digital paintings that he had done during this time. On the right-hand side here is a CryptoPunk. And again, this is part of a series. This one happens to have a COVID mask and it sold for more than $11 million. And so these imaginary things, digital things, are not imaginary, but they just exist in the digital realm, can be enormously costly and rare because you're able to make them fungible and they cannot be legally copied. But you can see here that I have copies of them that I'm showing to you, but these are not the original copies. There's also many corporations that have gotten in on trading NFTs. And so the National Basketball Association will sell you the rights to a particular play by a particular player. And it's a short movie clip like TikTok. And you own that. No one else owns that clip. And so Jack Dorsey, who started Twitter, sold the first tweet, for example, for something like $60 million, something like that. Topps is a company that used to, well, still does, make cards for sports. And so here in Canada, hockey cards, elsewhere, basketball cards, baseball cards, and so forth. And typically there'd be the player on the front and the statistics on the back. And one of the ways they made that electronic was that for a while, at least, on the digital backside of the digital trading card, you could see the statistics of the player or the team, and they would update instantly as the games were being played. So in directing some conclusions here, here the logo is actually called Baby Bitcoin, and it's another startup. But more and more of our life is digital. That includes things like our books, our cards, our music, our films, our videos. People used to write love letters back and forth. We now have a trail of WhatsApp messages, or perhaps in old-fashioned emails. And it's nothing like this packet of old love letters that your mother or your grandmother might have had. Currencies, art, sports moments, all of these things are being added to the digital realm. And some of these things even do away with ownership. So streaming music and streaming videos, you don't own that music, you just have access to it. And if your subscription stops, your access to that music stops. But I wrote a paper recently called You Are What You Can Access, that more and more of the things that define us and that show us to other people are things that are digital and we do not own them. Now, only a few of these things are really decentralized and have distributed ownership, but you can earn money with these things, similar to Sapna was talking about YouTube, for example. And if you have enough views, you can earn money on YouTube and similar platforms. But those with few views or few followers don't earn money. And some have argued that they're being exploited. And that's one of the reasons that we do see anti-monopoly legislation creeping up, and it's led the way to protections like GDPR in Europe, which Sapna also mentioned. But digitization marches on. And in looking to the future, I think we're going to see more and more digitization, obviously, but more and more decentralized and not completely decentralized hybrid models, as Sapna was talking about. So let me stop there, and I think we go into a dialogue now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So I don't know how we're operating this or if anyone is in charge, but maybe you have some reactions, Sapna, and then I can have some reactions.
Yeah, Professor Saif, did you have an approach for this on how you wanted us to kind of manage the discussion?
You have some questions. Okay, let us take a few questions that we are kind of sifting through, and let's have a discussion around those questions with the two of you here.
Okay. I can, I think if it's okay, Professor Belk raised a good question in the end of his presentation on the tech challenges and the questions around, monopolization and what is happening there. And I can only speak as on behalf of Google and tell you how we look at this. We are as a platform, as YouTube, you mentioned, if people aren't, if they have too few views, they might not see the monetization that they would aspire for. And that is very much top of mind, for us. And we're actually working to make sure that share is able to drive, help people to actually build businesses, drive employment, and be able to ensure that as a platform that we are creating a creation economy. Actually, YouTube's intent was always it's not a streaming platform per se in the same way. It's meant to be a place where people can share their points of view and create content and then build businesses on them. And you see we have thousands of creators who have millions of followers, and we do have creators that are just getting started. One of the metrics we actually look at every day in my world is creators that are making it, because it is an objective of ours to help make creators make it, right? That becomes actually the big objective on YouTube, is to help more creators make it. And then the other aspect of where we spend time is on making sure that we are driving employment through creation economies. I think beyond the whole businesses are being created on the backs of a platform like YouTube, to be able, whether it's original content, the Netflixes of the world have quite a bit of content creation, and it becomes quite expensive. YouTube is seen as an opportunity for anyone to be able to build original content, and you see aspiring and budding creators. So I agree with the point that not everyone is able to make it, but it becomes an objective. So somebody like me in my world, that's what I spend my time on. So this point on branding, to make sure that we can continue to have a strong brand, as we focus on making that happen. Because we realize, as Professor Belk said, the world is never going to go back from being digital, but we can make sure that there's fairness and equity across the board. And the reason I choose to work at a place like Google is because of the attention to equity. Though we're on a journey, and so it's never, and I think that's the evolution that we're on right now. So I hope that addresses the challenge from my point of view.
Yeah, there's a man named Alex Carr who wrote an opinion piece in the New Yorker a number of years ago now, but his title was, "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" And he was saying that we don't have to learn or memorize things any longer, because we just Google it. You're at a dinner or over at someone's house, and someone brings up a point and says, that's interesting. Well, let's Google it and find out. It turns out that's a very old argument. Plato and Socrates had the same argument. Socrates was the last of the great orators. Plato was the first of the great authors. And so Socrates accused Plato of making us stupid, because you could just look it up in a book. You didn't have to be able to have things in your mind any longer. But Google is a wonderful innovation. We couldn't live without Google at this time. And there are competitors, but Google is clearly on top of the world. The same is true with Facebook. And these are corporations that can, in a very short period of time, do incredible experiments to see what happens if we change the advertising model. What happens as a result of Apple deciding that you can opt out of cross-platform sharing. These are things that can be analyzed quite instantly with big data. My particular niche in the world is tiny data, small data. I use ethnographic methods. doing field work with interviews, with observation, including participant observation, doing some ethnography, as my colleague Rob Kosnitz has christened it, also being able to do projective measures, being able to use Zoom as we're doing right now. We've recently done some interviews in various places in India. In a study that we're doing on sensory perceptions. And we were doing that first face-to-face because we could bring samples of colors and clothing and scents and so forth to people's homes. We can now do that digitally. We can't quite bring them the scents yet of different perfumes digitally, although that's technically possible. We're not set up for it. But we can do all of the visual sensory things. But where we're coming from is that we get big data and algorithmic insights, and we still don't know why things are happening. And so on the ground, and this was something that Sapna also mentioned, being down on the ground, the necessity. We're down on the ground when we're doing this research, and we're trying to complement big data, or if you will, dig under big data and see what people are saying. So just as there's a role for centralized and decentralized brands, I think there's a role for macro, if you will, big data, but also micro, little data, and they can also complement one another. So I guess I'll leave it there and toss it back to Sapna.
And those are great points. I'll respond to two of them. So I agree with you. I sometimes the question on is Google making you stupid? And I think about my kids, right, versus how I learned and I studied. It's very different. The access to information that they have changes the way that they're learning. At the same time, what I see, and you mentioned Google being a great innovation, is that in the world that we're in, actually information has not been equitable across time. Books, for example, have not always created equity, you could argue, because of the fact that you have to be able to read to be able to access those books, or and in the world that we're in, and this is why I spend a lot of time on equity on the internet, is that access to information can be different now, and Google as an enabler, for example, using voice or audio, that people can ask questions using their voice to be able to drive empowerment, is something that actually gives me quite a bit of solace. I'll share an example, that being on the ground in rural India and talking to women who haven't had access to information. They've been withheld certain information. They don't know the laws sometimes. They don't know about what's happening, what's the law around child marriage, because nobody will tell them about that, either in education or through the voices that they hear in the rural areas where they live. And now when they get access to the internet and they can ask questions using their voice, they find out things. And I met this one woman who said now that she has access, and she's not literate, she uses her voice. She says, I ask every question that I've had, what's the age that you're supposed to get married? What happens if, around rights around the girl child? How do I get an education if I'm not, if I don't have the background to get one? And how do I open a bank account? Everything, these things that people have. And so I look at, and why I moved to India from the US, why I've been spending time there, is I now see the ability for technology to create more equity, though it's going to be a tough challenge and a road ahead for us to move ahead, because it's not going to be perfect overnight. And there is going to be the inequity of even usage, right? The fact that you could argue there's a digital divide that's being created. Sometimes that is a topic that comes up, right? And I fully believe that that's the case, but I also believe the role that technology can play to eliminate that divide over time if we pay attention to it. And as Google, how we are paying attention, figuring out how we can reduce the divide. And the 30 million women trained that we had discussed at the beginning in my intro, nobody ever asked me to give them a business case on why we should do that at Google. The question was never raised, Sapna, why do you need to spend millions of dollars to make this happen? And it's because it's mission driven. And so it comes back to this point on like ultimately leadership and the missions and the strategies that are created can really help to drive that consistency across countries, markets, and products like Google. And so that's, that's how I see this world of hopefully it's not making people stupid, but making some more people smart along the way as well. Maybe I know I took too long on that one. I know there's questions that I think that maybe the audience has as well. But I fully subscribe and agree with the points that Professor Belk has made. So actually, we don't have to debate too much.
Maybe I can just respond quick.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Sorry?
Go ahead,
just
sir.
respond quickly before the audience goes in, because there were some valuable things that Sabna just said. Voice being able to overcome illiteracy and innumeracy is a big issue. There's actually a book by Serpentine Hunan called A Village Goes Mobile, and she looked over a period of 5 years. Actually, she'd been doing work in the village for longer than that, at the changes that took place. And it did empower people, not just women, but men as well, entrepreneurs of different sorts. And for better or worse, it increased the number of love marriages, for example, that people could now interact on phone. They had fewer visits back to their relatives because now you could communicate with them. Medical care improved because they could make appointments in a nearby city and get transportation to it. And so it makes an enormous difference. On the other hand, voice is slow to take over. We did a study in Switzerland where we assigned people over a period of 3 weeks a series of tasks to do on their smartphones, whether Android or Apple, using a series of voice-only commands that they had to discover. And they split down the middle between three groups that we called servant, friend, or master. Some of them saw their smart devices as servants that they could order around. Some of them saw it as friends, that in a partnership they could do things they could not do independently. And some of them saw it as master, that they couldn't master this device. It was like a dog who wouldn't obey commands, or a senile old person who didn't understand, and they had to keep shouting at it. And so if these these were college students, could not master voice, it's going to be slower for other people perhaps as well. And in the village that I mentioned, these people could not download ringtones or movies on their own, but there were soon entrepreneurs that would do that for them and would take in their phones every so often and update them. So I just wanted to
if I can respond to that one, I'd love to share a point, because what I think is interesting is that you're right. Voice has not taken off in all parts of the world. Interestingly, I don't know if you all know this, but voice for Google, India is the #1 market for usage of voice. The Geo phone that was launched a few years ago, the KaiOS phone, the only way to access that phone was because it was a smart feature phone. Essentially, it wasn't a smartphone. That was through voice. And actually, on that, when you asked users why they use their voice, they said, why would I do it any other way? It was too hard to actually use if you think about the old feature phones, right? And the ability for F9 and escape and all these things, to be able to even do stuff on that phone is impossible. So they said, I won't use any other way. And so India has become the #1 market for Google for usage of voice. And because of language, I think there's so many languages. The ability to type in vernacular is also very hard in India. It actually takes twice as long to type in Hindi than it does in English, and sometimes even more. And so from that lens, what we hear quite a bit is, why would I do it any other way? And we have this debate with our global teams quite a bit when there is this perception about new internet users. India is all new internet users, you could argue, and people, we're still only at half of India being connected. So every month when we add 10 million users, they're all new internet users. They haven't used it before. But we are seeing leapfrogging of behavior. I've actually just had a discussion recently to stop calling these users new or novice internet users, because the way that they're learning, and I would say leapfrogging, India's moved past desktop and gone to mobile. India has leapfrogged on digital payments and what's happening with UPI now. You wouldn't see, I worked in payments in the US for years, and there's the success on digital payments in India versus an evolved or developed market like the US is phenomenal, and it brings me a lot of delight. Again, anytime anybody asks me to go back to the US and work, I'm like, why would I? All of the change is happening in India. And so when I see the behavior change, it's a long time coming. I'll say this, it's taken a while. Getting the first few 100 million internet users in India online took a long time. And it was frustrating to me. I've been at Google 7 years, but now what I'm seeing today is this change. And because tech companies are leaning in a place like India and building in newer ways. So what I talked about on the geophone was built specifically for that phone. It wasn't taking a US model on how people are using voice on smart speakers and applying it to the world. It was actually using new paradigms for how technology should be built. And the fact that we have teams on the ground, it's very unique. We don't have product teams in all countries across the world, but now we're investing because we see the opportunity to really build new paradigms coming out of India that can then be translated to the rest of the world, to other markets in Africa or the Middle East or other developing economies in Latin America as well.
Sorry, you mentioned payments, and I thought of China as being a good example where Google is barred, but payments are all by smartphones now, and so you can't get a taxi with cash. You've got to have a smartphone app, which requires having a bank account in China. So you can withdraw money with your face from an ATM machine, and something we can't do in the West or India either. So China's another example of rushing ahead digitally and leapfrogging as they go as well.
Absolutely.
And monitoring people as well. So there's a dark side to that.
There is.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I think the audience has been completely enthralled by the conversation we've had till now. And there are a number of questions pouring in. So we'll go ahead with the first question, which has been asked by Adishri. So she asks, decentralization will redefine ownership, but humans by nature are possessive beings about their material wealth. So how disruptive of a transition will decentralization actually be? Professor Russell or Ms. Sapna, if both of you could comment on.
Well, decentralization and digitization that is involved in the issues of ownership, nifties that I was talking about. But even things like streaming music, we used to have our record collections that had information on the back of the record album. And we used to be able to show that record collection to other people, same with book collections. But now when we can instantly access these things, people don't miss it. They can make the transition. It may take a generation for people to be completely comfortable with not owning things that can be digitized. But I think we have made that transition for the most part already. And so books and CDs and DVDs are all going away because you can instantly access these things online through the internet. And I think there's not complete replacement. Some people are going back to vinyl records and photography with film that needs to be developed and so forth for various reasons. So analog has not completely been swept away by digital. Decentralization is such a wonderful idea, and the idea is let's cut out the middleman, middle person. Why have a government or a bank get the income from this? Why not be able to send all of my earnings back from this country to that country? And that makes a lot of sense to cut out the middleman and have us recoup those costs. But of course, there are people that are going to oppose that. Governments can't implement fiscal policy if they don't have control of the currency, and banks lose a tremendous source of income and investment opportunities and new ventures and so forth as well. So it's a contentious area for those reasons.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Sapna, would you want to comment on this too, or?
Nothing further from my end.
Sure. So the second question that we have is more specifically directed to you, Ms. Sabna. So we have a question from Bhaskar, and he asks, with the kind of transcended reach that Google has currently across demographies, economies, political spheres, and so on, how difficult or otherwise is it to establish and gauge the audience for a particular marketing set?
That's a great question, which I get all the time, because I mentioned during my discussion that Google is essentially building for everyone. And so when you build for everyone, it's really hard to also market to everyone. At the same time, I would say, and I think it's not yet fully transcendent. You could argue that, again, half of India, for example, is online. And if you look across the world, that still is the case. It's very, we don't think about that every day. So reach is not completely transcendent. And I spend quite a bit of time actually trying to grow that set. So we're not yet there at that achieving our mission. But when we look at our customer base, it depends on product to product, right? If you look at a company like Google, we have a portfolio of products, and every product could have a different strategy. Sometimes you can liken us to a consumer packaged goods company that has a suite of products across different categories, from food to hair care to other. In the same way, Google has products like Google Search, but also products around like YouTube, Chrome, Maps, Google Play, Android, and each product has a different strategy depending on its place and time and evolution and where it sits. And so from that lens, we create segmentation. Marketing theory still applies, and so our segmentation and thinking about the segments and how they operate differently. Products like YouTube Premium and subscriptions business will target one segment, whereas YouTube Shorts, which is our short form video platform, will have a completely different approach, right? And so at the end of the day, it's the same answer that applies everywhere else, which is you have to look at it at a product level, and based on the business objectives. Each product has a different business objective. Therefore, we will build different strategies and targeting. I think when I look at the mother brand for Google is where you could argue that's a question on how do you want to develop that deep brand across the board. And we don't think about building the mother brand so much. We are still very much a focused product company, and therefore have strategies by product. I hope that answers the question. But everything you're learning in school still applies, is what I would say. So, not school. I know it's in the U.S. we call it school. College and MBA programs are still considered school. But so in the work that you're doing, the philosophies still apply. In case you're wondering if it will apply, it will.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Our next question is from Shayandan. He asks, doesn't being a distributed business hinder the opportunity of being the market leaders specifically for startups, since there is a lack of dedicated market segment for the same?
Short answer, yes. It hinders possibilities because you don't have the control. You don't have the opportunity to direct what's happening. You don't have a marketing department. You don't have marketing. And so all of those things are hindrances. On the other hand, if you create the next Bitcoin or the next sub-platform of Bitcoin or the next fork of Bitcoin, all of these things are opportunities for businesses that can branch off of that startup, that organization. And of course, the idea of blockchain is one that has proliferated tremendously and has all sorts of possibilities for executing contracts instantly, having a record, a file of things as well. And so that was also an idea at one point. And it's an idea that despite not anyone owning blockchain as an idea, has certainly taken off. And so, if you think about things like Hinduism, I mentioned, is a distributed brand. Does its distribution mean that it can't get stronger compared to Islam, which is more centralized and has some authorities, local and otherwise? Can they do more proselytizing? And does that mean that in the long run they're going to be a more successful brand? I think there's many more issues than that are involved in looking at something like that. But just as the world is split between different operating systems right now, it's also split on the basis of languages, religions, and a number of other things as well that are distributed. And so these are things that cannot be not distributed. I guess in Orwell's 1984, we had the sort of speech that you could do and the things that you could say and the things that you could see. But short of that dictatorship, which was flawed as well, we cannot have complete control over anything. And as both Sapna and I think emphasized that hybrid models are certainly the way to go, that things that are partly but not totally distributed have a much greater chance of having a trajectory that has been planned.
Yeah, I'll just add one point because it's interesting when I think about at Google, we don't have marketing teams for every product that we build from the get-go. And so essentially businesses are created like startups in mind. And it takes there's a certain point in time and place where marketing gets involved. And it's not always from the get-go. And it comes back to the advantages that Professor Belk spoke about, right? Which is that you don't want things to get in the way of success and innovation. So sometimes not having that centralization and that structure is good. But then there comes a point in time when we say, okay, now marketing is important at a point in time, right? And what we say is when there's a ton of organic growth and a product can grow on its own, that's when we actually know that marketing is going to be involved, because then when it grows on its own and it grows really fast, then you need to think about your customer base and the segments and loyalty and doing the right thing and not taking risky calls or handling crisis when they come up or managing PR and communication when you get tough questions or when you get a regulator asking questions as well. That's why, there's a point in time, even within big companies, you have to think about having a startup culture because there's benefits at that time of not letting other things get in the way.
Thank you, ma'am and professor, for your insights. Our next question is from Farman. He asks, now the world is digital. Without copyright, how is it possible to protect individual creativity, especially in an era where data is so fluid and difficult to trace?
I don't know if in this world we don't pay attention to copyright. I think, as I look at least my day-to-day, I spend a lot of time with legal and others, right? I think ultimately when I think about YouTube as a platform and music rights, right? We spend a lot of money working with the labels to be able to have music and build YouTube as a platform for that. It's not free. If there's a perception that it is, it's not. And I think also when it comes to, like Google search is a platform which helps to connect the dots between and to drive, information access. But ultimately, the copyright still does sit with the owners of the property and the sites, et cetera, right? And so therefore, as Google, we work with news publishers, for example, all the time to ensure that their information, the value of the creation that they're doing is equated. Now, I know that there's always debates on, is it enough? Could we do more? And this is always like an evolution and a discussion, but I wouldn't say that in this world of digitization, there's no copyright.
Yeah, I guess I would add to that with NFTs, they're certainly owned. And one of the things that NFTs are doing are providing opportunities for artists to get more of a share of the escalation in prices of their work. They can also release editions, and so they can have a copy of a particular basketball play, but then they can have number 1, number 2, number 3, up to a limited edition of 10, 20, 100, and the lower numbers are more valuable. Artists could do that with prints before, but now they can retain a portion of the ownership of the things that they're selling if they wish. And so this is also an old argument that goes back to a sale of some pop art, where one of the artists at the show had originally sold his painting for $1,200 to a particular investor, and that investor was selling it for $11 million. And he's saying, "I worked hard to make that for you. Where is my cut of the money?" And the collector said, "Well, I worked hard to get this price up to this level as well. We're complementing one another." But with Nifty's, it's possible that the artist could retain a greater share of the future ownership and escalation of prices of their work. And so, just as an example, copyright certainly applies there, and it's something that can carry along like the provenance of a painting, where it comes from, who has owned it in the past, and so forth, all of which can be verified with the blockchain.
Thank you, sir. I think we will have our last question now because of the paucity of time. So the question revolves around regulations, and it states, while working towards digital equity, how does Google and other organizations define the line which regulates users and user-related content? And this comes from the perspective that most people have a different stand towards what regulation should be.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's an evolving question. If you think about, I don't know if you're familiar, but India recently released something called the Intermediary Liability Guidelines and Regulations, right? And I think this is, and we have been working side by side to ensure that, one, we can work with the government to share our point of view, but also to adhere to what the government's asking of platforms and providers like us, right? And so it's, I think the way we look at our role is one in which we need to work towards to the future with the understanding the objectives and the motivations on both sides are actually the same. If you look down to why the regulation exists, it's actually around user safety. It's around ensuring there's no harm, and it's also ensuring to allow anyone to be able to raise their voice to say what should or shouldn't be put out into the world, right? And to be able to not give too much power to any particular platform. And we agree with that. And so if you look at Google's stance and how we've reacted, it's very much in adherence. And I think because at the end of the day, it comes back to the mission as around equity, but also, around responsibility. And so I think and this is my personal point of view, right? I'm not speaking here on behalf of Google, but I working inside Google, I can tell you responsibility is at the core of what we stand for. And therefore, when you see regulation that's being proposed that makes sense, then you move along with it. And it doesn't mean we have to change our platforms to be able to work in side by side. Yes. And so we actually will continue to evolve our platforms in this world. And I think that's where I call it that hybrid approach, right? You can't operate without having the approach on the ground where we will be taking part in these discussions as the internet evolves and digitization should happen and accelerate. India is going to have almost 900 million internet users in the next 3 years. We all have a part to play into doing that in a safe and equitable and responsible way.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, Professor. Due to the paucity of time, we will now not be able to take any more questions. We have heard today about how decentralization and increased integration with technology is the future of marketing and deep branding. It will change our world in ways impossible. And it's imperative that we work in tangent with regulations to build better experiences for everyone. A heartfelt thank you to our panelists, Sabna Chada and Professor Bell. It has been an absolute honor and privilege to have esteemed panelists like you with us today. We thank you for this scintillating discussion and for enlightening all of us with your valuable insights. We'd also like to thank our audience for such an engaging participation. We hope you all had a great time interacting with the industry stalwarts. We'll now have a short break and we'll reconvene for the next session at 2:25 p.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.